Most large capital renovation projects don't go over budget because of contractors. They go over budget because the capital decisions was never structured well enough to survive execution. Owners don't usually have a construction problem, they have a comparability problem. They receive multiple bids, they get new scopes, they review those, and then they approve the capital based on those scopes. But the inputs behind those approvals are largely aligned enough to behave predictably when the work begins. And when outcomes drift, the only phase visible is the construction phase, and that's the phase that's typically blamed. My name is RoDevia Brigham, and I'm the founder and CEO of Proposabid, and we work with owners and asset managers on large capital expenditure projects, focusing on how those decisions are actually structured before the execution begins. And we also include sourcing and organizing contractor bids, standardizing scopes, and aligning assumptions so that they can be evaluated on truly comparable basis before the capital is even committed. So in this topic, we have the phase everyone can see. So before we look at any diagrams, consider where attention naturally goes once a project is underway. It goes to the phase that is active, the phase with movement, people, invoices, and visible change. Construction is where work becomes tangible. It's where decisions take physical form, and where progress can be measured, and where variances can be observed in real time. Because of that, it becomes the center of discussions, not by design, but just by the visibility aspect. And so the scenario we're going to take a look at is what happens when most visible phases becomes the reference point for understanding an entire project, not to evaluate it, but just to see what it draws as far as our attention. Okay, so here is the situation. We have a value add renovation that is underway across multiple portfolios. The project was approved 6 months earlier during the capital planning phase. And the approval materials included a high-level scope description and a summarized bid presentation. Construction is now 70% complete. Costs are trending 14% above the original budget. Several change orders reference conditions not clearly defined in the initial scope, and the contractor states that they are executing exactly what had been authorized through updated drawings and approvals. The original asset manager who sponsored the project is no longer with the firm. So now the decision pressure is on, and leadership has some questions. Why was the project over budget? Was the execution actually controlled? And who owns the variance? On top of that, whether similar projects carry the same risk. A review meeting has been called while construction continues. Time is passing and invoices are being processed. So now we're going to ask a singular structural question. What is being evaluated right now for this particular scenario? Is it the performance of the construction itself? Or is it the clarity of the earlier decisions that were made before the construction even began? So construction is the only active phase that is still visible. It contains the numbers, the activity, and the friction now drawing attention. But construction is operating within the parameters that were defined earlier. That is through scope language, assumptions, and comparisons that are no longer fully reconstructible. So that means that the execution can display the variances. However, it cannot explain how uncertainty was originally framed, accepted, or bounded. So the observable object is the job site, is construction. And the explanatory object sits somewhere earlier where fewer artifacts remained. And that's in the decision phase. So the conversation is anchored to what can be seen. And the conditions being reacted to were formed where visibility is much lower. And those are two different layers. So I have a question for my property owners. If the only part of the project we can now examine is construction, what protected your capital at the moment you approved it? Not how well the work was managed afterward, but what made the original decision durable enough to survive time, personnel changes, and real conditions. Because if that cannot be reconstructed today, it was never fully structured when the money moved in the first place. And the second question I have is for my portfolio managers, my property management companies, at asset managers and platforms, and also for vendors. If postmortems can only analyze what was built, are you being asked to explain outcomes that were never fully defined when they were authorized? And if ownership begins asking to see decision records, not just the construction records, would your role change from managing projects to demonstrating how the project was decided in the first place? If this feels familiar, or if you've been in conversations like this, that's the layer we spend our time examining. And you're welcome to reach out if that's relative to the work that you're doing.